The actual cancer itself and like the chemotherapy, for the most part, I think I didn't have too much of a problem with. I think the harder part was feeling lonely, which actually it's interesting. I think people nowadays can understand it a lot better with COVID. It was very fascinating for me all of a sudden when everyone started socially isolating and wearing masks and all that stuff. My name is Marcus Forst. I'm a member of the 2019 cohort and a PhD student in applied physics. I imagine a world where people check in on their friends.
Welcome to the Imagine a World podcast from Knight-Hennessy Scholars. We are here to give you a glimpse into the Knight-Hennessy scholar community of graduate students, spanning all 7 Stanford schools, including business, education, engineering, humanities, law, medicine, and sustainability. In each episode, we talk with scholars about the world they imagine and what they are doing to bring it to life.
Today we've got Marcus Forst, a 5th-year PhD candidate in applied physics. During our conversation, you'll hear Marcus's experience growing up in a small town, dreaming of a gluten-free croissant, his journey with cancer, how to build a microscope, and so much more. Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the Imagine a World podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Willie Thompson, a member of the 2022 cohort. Spent 2 years at the business school, and now I'm at the ed school. And as always, I'm joined by a co-host, and you heard her already in episodes past and present. You'll hear her again. Sydney Hunt.
Hey everyone, my name is Sydney Hunt. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a member of the 2023 Knight-Hennessy Scholars cohort. I am a 2nd-year PhD student in electrical engineering, and I'm really, really excited for today's episode. So thanks for listening.
Awesome. Terminal degrees. And our special guest for today is described as a nexus person. I heard that maybe 10, 15 minutes ago.
Something like that. Yeah, I don't actually know what that means.
Okay, all right. Okay. Anyway, we got Marcus Forst on the podcast today, everybody. What's up, Marcus?
Great to be here.
Well, dope. Well, look, we got so much to talk about. I heard your Imagine a World statement. Very simple.
Thanks.
Yet elegant.
Oh,
and I feel like it's hard to do.
Yeah. I don't know. I was thinking a bunch about imagining a world. And I think, it's just one of the things that I talked about in my Knight-Hennessy application and also just something that I really try and do myself, mostly because I wish other people would do it. So,
Yeah.
Well, we've got the Imagine a World statement. You already talked about your application. I'm sure we'll get to that in a second at some point in the conversation. But people know that at the beginning of these conversations, we always... Well, actually, before I even get to the opening question, how are you doing? I mean, you came from Mississippi. You've been in Palo Alto for a week now?
Yeah, it's a little odd. So I moved right before I went to Mississippi for 2 months. Yeah, it was just kind of strange coming back here. I no longer live in the house that I lived in for 5 years while I was here. And so just coming back to a house that I'd never actually, I'd slept in, I guess, 2 times. And so, we didn't have pepper. I realized this when I was first trying to cook here. Yeah. I was like, how do we not have pepper? Anyway, one of my former roommates must have taken the pepper. But yeah, it was definitely different, and I'm still kind of adjusting to it. But I've had a couple of good days. I mean, recently I'm feeling a little more settled. So yeah.
What is important for you to make your new home feel like home? Is there a turning point?
I think it would be cool to have people over. I think that would help. I haven't actually done that yet. It definitely helped me to unpack a little bit more, specifically my room. But yeah, I think having people over for dinner or something and cooking, and I think that would help. I've only cooked once in the house, and that's just kind of weird. Outside of breakfast, which I feel like, I don't know, somehow it doesn't count as much. Yeah.
Could have easily recorded this podcast at your house.
Yeah, we could have. Yeah. Then maybe
and then you could have fed us
like home. Yeah, that's true. I could have. But yeah, that'll happen, and yeah, it'll be good.
Got it. And last question, and then we'll get to actually your origin story. But what's your go-to dish when you cook? Do you have a go-to thing where you're I got to impress the people, let them know I'm nice with a skillet?
Depends and varies, I guess. But I have a rotation. So I have a recipe from Tyler Chen, who's actually also in my cohort of Knight-Hennessy. It's a lob dish. It's like a Thai ground meat dish. Super good. Very simple. And so that's really great. It's a crowd pleaser. You eat it with lettuce wraps. And then I'll often, make like salmon and broccoli. That's just a classic with rice. I also like making kofta. So yeah, like lamb kofta. It's like lamb meatballs in like a Arab style. And then, you have it with, like labna or hummus and
Yum.
yeah.
That sounds really good.
I know. Yeah. I think we may make this happen.
Yeah. And then I bring pita bread, which I can't eat because I have celiac, but other people can eat. And so I imagine it's good. Maybe that should have been my Imagine a World thing is I imagine a world where there are gluten-free croissants. That would have been good.
Wait, is there no such thing as a gluten-free croissant?
I've never had one. So it's actually one of my life streams is to eat a croissant one day.
We should make that happen.
I don't know what they taste like.
There has to be someone.
But they sound really good.
They are
sound
very
really good,
Yeah.
It's like that and Danishes, I feel like also look really good.
I think croissants are a little bit better than Danishes, so I would do that first.
Okay.
But yeah, before we graduate, we should get you a gluten-free croissant.
All right, people listening. If you know where we can find a gluten-free croissant from Marcus, please.
Preferably a good one too, because
Yeah.
you
Good
never
point.
know. Because some of these, like the other day, I came home from Walmart. I was so excited because they had these like pretzels filled with, I don't know, it was like cheese or whatever. They're like pretzels filled with peanut butter or cheese, whatever. And I've never had them before, so I was all excited, and then they were just horrible.
Yeah, they're pretty bad.
So yeah, that was disappointing.
Yeah.
Is that consensus?
Are they bad in gluten
I think
world
they're
too?
bad
or?
with gluten included, yeah. But croissants are excellent, especially chocolate croissants. So yeah, we need to find any bakery, any baker, any person who just wants to give Marcus a piece of a whole, not just a piece, a whole croissant. Send us an email, DM us.
Yeah, write us to the pod so we can fulfill this lifelong dream of Marcus.
Yeah.
Well, cool. We have a lot to talk about aside from your cooking skills and your desires to have what I call like the perfect pastry and a croissant. But before we talk about the world you imagine, let's talk about the world you're born into and the world you've experienced thus far. So, Marcus, for the folks who are listening, where are you from and what was your journey here to Stanford?
Yeah, so I'm from the suburbs of Philadelphia, so about an hour west by car. And
Avondale.
Yes, Avondale, Pennsylvania. It's known as the mushroom capital of, I guess, the USA. It's right by Kennett Square, which has famous like Kennett Square mushrooms. What that meant is that we had a minor advantage in all sporting events that were at home because it smelled so badly of manure and mushrooms that it just just really got to the other teams. You'd think that we'd do better, but we actually didn't. We weren't a powerhouse or anything. But yeah, it was actually pretty cool because you could just go and get a giant box of mushrooms for $5, and
Nice.
yeah, it was awesome.
And so you grew up there with the mushrooms.
That's correct.
Something I find interesting in like your background and your upbringing is that you were, last time I checked, Avondale was of a time about 1,200 people, and we haven't had a ton of people on the pod who are from small towns. Like Will's born in a small town in France. Emily Russell's from a town about 5,000.
Yeah.
Like. Now, I mean, Palo Alto is also not a big town, but like I feel like you've experienced like big towns and small towns in your life. Like, what do you feel is so unique about a small town that doesn't get sort of noticed or shows up in your personality?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think I really thought of myself as being from a small town, maybe because I grew up in a neighborhood. But I do think it's unique when I think about, I guess, California, or rather, I should say the Bay Area with its kind of like sprawling suburb. I described Avondale as a suburb, but it is, it's like the border of suburb and farm. I think in my specific case, my world was very centered around this neighborhood. And so like my brother and I, we would come home from school and then we would just like walk around the neighborhood, gathering up different friends and basically, I don't know, trying to play kickball or something like that. To get back to your question of what's unique about the small town was maybe just that we had the space to do that, to just walk. And I don't know, we were never afraid of anything. We just would bike around and walk around and then come home for dinner. And then, maybe if I'm actually thinking back, it is interesting. I recently went to a wedding to one high school friend. It was cool because he invited a bunch of his high school friends who I knew. We weren't as close, but he also invited their parents. And it's interesting that I knew all of those parents. They all went to my church. And it's something I have thought about here because, there aren't a lot of people, I feel like, who talk about church in California. Or if they do, it's, I guess, maybe not super centered. And I wouldn't say that it didn't feel very, I guess, front of mind in high school. It felt very normal, and it felt very easy and normal to see these people again, and honestly lovely. There's a part of me that wonders a little bit how other people in my high school, I guess, looked at me for going to church, which is something that I never would have even thought about in high school. So maybe it's just not weird in Avondale, but here I think it's a little more or different.
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, like moving to a new place that's just so different from your hometown, you start to notice a lot of like different little things that don't come up in conversation as much, or feelings that you don't realize you miss when you go back home and you see people and their little aspects and qualities that make it feel like time has never passed. I guess my next question following up on that is like, what was, I feel like, your community experience like through growing up, through college, coming to Stanford? Like, how do you feel like on the topic of community that has transitioned, stayed the same, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I would go around rounding up people to play kickball or basketball, or we had this game called Predator and Prey where we'd chase each other around. We'd like pretend to be like gazelles, or we'd pretend to be, we'd switch through different climates. And I think, I continued to do that when I went to Temple. I tried to organize friends to all go to the football games or the basketball games. I did it probably a little less there, but then when I came to Stanford, I did this a lot. Like I did this a lot in Knight-Hennessy. I threw the Knight-Hennessy Halloween party. I decided that we should have a formal, and I threw the first Knight-Hennessy formal.
Thank you for your service.
Nice. Both of those things are now traditions.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, I feel honored to be sitting in the room with the person who started it all.
I didn't start the Halloween party. I was the second person. We used to, when it was all student run, we would pass it down basically to a first year. COVID also interrupted that. But yeah, I did those. I, started the field day, which we haven't, I guess, continued. But I loved, I guess, throwing events. And I've been in the honors program at Temple, and I wanted to bring some of that feeling to Knight-Hennessy. And yeah, I hope I've been able to do that a little bit. So maybe that's the answer, is everywhere I go, I kind of try to find that neighborhood. In Avondale, it was my actual neighborhood. And at Temple, it was the honors program. And here it's been Knight-Hennessy. So
to that point, tell us about your experience going to college, because you stay in state, you become an owl, you become a hooter. You do a lot of things at Temple, and I'm wondering for you, what were some of the things that drew you to Temple, led you to choose Temple, and then how was that experience formative for you in terms of how you then chose to pursue a terminal degree, as they call them?
Yeah, so I'm a third generation Temple owl, so my grandfather went there. Something like that. Yeah, I guess, do we have a call? I don't think we do.
I don't know. Is that actually what owls say?
I think there's just depends probably on the owl, but I think, yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. But yeah, so my grandfather went there, and then both my parents met there in the marching band. Yeah, very cute. My dad was the rebel trying to throw parties and stuff, and then my mom was like the secretary or the treasurer or whatever, the marching band, and very straight-laced, and somehow they decided to start dating. And I don't know, it feels like an 80s movie.
What instruments did they play?
Clarinet and trombone, which you can guess which one was which.
Well, okay. I was seeing a drumline story here, but never mind.
Yeah. So they met at Temple, and we used to go to Temple games. There's a picture of me, and this used to be more cool, being held by Bill Cosby at a basketball game. And so, yeah, we just, I don't know, used to go to basketball games all the time. My grandmother has season tickets to watch basketball games. She knows all the, people selling tickets. She knows all the security guards, and she gives lollipops to everyone who's sitting around her.
That's so cute.
To the point where I once, I introduced I think now interim president of Temple to my grandmother. I don't think he was at the time, but I guess I knew him from something. And I saw him walking around. I was like, oh, you've got to meet my grandmother. And she gave him a lollipop. And so now whenever the president of Temple University goes to a basketball game, he goes to my grandmother to get his lollipop ride. It's awesome.
I love that.
In her bag, like her grandma with a peppermint. Okay, it's a Victoria Monet situation going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, she's great.
What kind of lollipops, by the way? I'm just curious.
It varies, mostly Tootsie Pops.
Oh, my dog's
With the
name was
chocolatey
Tootsie.
center?
Yeah.
Oh, bro, I haven't Tootsie. Have you? What's the last time you had
Yes,
Tootsie
They're
Pops?
a
so
lot.
good.
Because my dog's name was Tootsie, and so ever since we got her, all of a sudden we had Tootsie Rolls, Tootsie Pops, everything in the house. Yeah.
They're great. They stand the test of time. But yeah, so I think in the back of my head, there was always comfort with going to, with just Temple and Philly, because we would go there pretty often. But then when I was applying for schools in high school, I was like very ambitious, like looking up US News, like rankings, like I want to go into like the best places. So I applied to, I guess, like 11 schools, and I got like fully rejected from like every single school except for Temple, Pitt, and UNC, which ended up being, it was too expensive. I was like, I'm not going to go.
Yeah.
For out of state,
For
yeah.
out of state
it's
it is, yeah.
impossible. So it came down to Temple and Pitt, and at my high school, basically the smart kids would just go to Pitt. Like this is just like the pipeline. My high school was just like a pipeline to Pitt. You go to Pitt, you'd be an engineer, you'd like work for the like Pitt racing team, and then you'd get some amazing engineering job, and then that was just kind of like the path. And so yeah, I went to visit Pitt, and I was like, this is nice, but I guess didn't really click. And my mom was like, you have to apply to Temple, and then she was like, you have to go to your visit. And then I went, and I was like, this is amazing. I saw Temple Honors used to do these shows. I guess they probably still do for accepted students to try and persuade them to go. And I was just blown away by the show. It was so funny, and people were so great. Everyone's, just so friendly, and it just felt amazing, instantly amazing. And afterward, my parents and I went to watch an orchestra concert. I think it was like the Temple Orchestra was playing or something. And I was just like, whoa, I did not expect this visit to go this well. And then I came home, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to Temple. So that's how it happened.
Then you became an owl. It's official.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I feel like I really like how you focus on so many of the little details of like the feelings and places and the people that create that aura, that vibe that you really, really enjoy. I'm curious, you mentioned that like Pitt is, where the engineers go, etc. But you're now here at Stanford doing a applied physics PhD, which is still like very, very STEMmy. Like where did that interest, I guess, come from?
Yeah, I mean, I've always liked science and math in class. Math, I think I just found fun. But I think I also have to credit my mom. So my mom would come in my first and second grade class. She would come in and do like science demos. It was like for the class. And so, there was this one demo that she used to do where she would take these markers and kind of put it on a coffee filter and then dip it in water, and it would like show all the different pigments that were all like making this like black marker.
Wait, hold on. Describe that again, because I might try this later tonight.
Yeah, so you basically like, it's been a long time, but I don't know, since first grade. But I don't know if you like draw with the marker or you like dip. You take like the back off and dip it in the pool of ink. But then if you put it in water, it just like disperses all the ink. I guess maybe because there's some kind of like capillary action, and like the different colors are different weights or something.
Through a coffee filter. Basically.
We should ask my mom. I don't actually know the science behind it.
We'll do a parents
but I just remember it blew my mind. It was also fun because I just felt so cool that like my mom was here showing us science. Like it was just, and I just, I think, I wanted to, I don't know. I think it inspired a lot of pride, and I kind of just wanted to, I guess, be like my mom.
Yeah. Was she a scientist?
She wasn't. She was going to be a chemist and then a chemistry teacher, but she switched her undergrad to computer science. Mm-hmm. So which is pretty sick. But she always loved science, and definitely we would go to the nature center, and we go to the zoo all the time, and read lots of dinosaur books and stuff like that.
Nice. I love it. Yay, women in STEM. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah.
In CS in the 80s, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
Yeah. I mean, she's really, really smart. So it makes sense. But
well, so you're at Temple, you're doing a bunch of stuff at Temple. We might get to some of that in your improbable facts section, but you graduate, and then there's like this whole like coming to Stanford like piece and research. And I know a lot of what can be found about you and like what you're studying is around building the next generation of microscopes and tools for solving medical problems. I want to know what got you interested in solving medical problems first and foremost. How do you build a microscope? You know what I'm saying? Like,
if you're really curious, I took a class last year that was on building like scientific syllabi. And I wrote a class called "So You Want to Build a Microscope."
Like a play on Frozen? On Do You Want to Build a Snowman?
No, it's actually a play on. It's okay. You keep being like you're so smart. You're referencing things, but I am actually doing a reference this time.
Go ahead. What's the reference this time? For some reason, when you said it, I heard it sung as like, "Do you want to build a snowman?" For some reason, anyway.
Do you want to build a microscope?
Come on, let's go and look.
I think I see bacteria.
That's so good.
Slide.
I think I gotta zoom in. Okay, all right. Sorry.
Okay, go. Sorry.
It's a play on the book series "So You Want to Be a Wizard."
Oh,
yeah, which is somewhat niche, but very good. At least it was when I read it in third grade or whatever.
Okay,
yeah.
Lasting impact.
Yeah. The main components of a microscope are the lenses, which like kind of focus the light, and then the camera. The most simple microscope that I would have people build in that class is basically there's this thing called an objective lens, which is it's the thing you think about in a microscope that you kind of like turn and it changes the magnification. You know what I'm talking about? It has like the colors on it.
It's been a long time since a microscope. Yeah. The
So
turning helped me figure
exactly.
out.
It turns and it has colors on it. Yeah. The colors tell you which magnification it is.
Gotcha.
And that thing, it looks kind of like a cylinder with a little cone at the end. That is actually a bunch of different lenses that basically just take the light and then take the light from something really small and then kind of blow it up so it's bigger. That's what gives you the magnification. And the most important thing that it does in, I guess, nowadays is that it takes the light and turns it into a beam that you can then kind of like send to different places and do different things to. Once you have that part, all you need is one more part to make it two more parts to make it a functioning microscope. And that's another lens. So when you're thinking about the tabletop microscope that you turn the wheels and it moves the stage up and down, you have an eyepiece that you look into. That is the second lens that I'm talking about, is the eyepiece. In the microscope where you use a camera, you just have a different lens that focuses it onto a camera.
I see.
So you basically need two lenses and then a camera, and then, that's your microscope.
It makes it sound so simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny. When I started my project, I was trying to make this super fancy schmancy microscope. And I basically found that the more parts I added, the worse it got. And so I eventually just stripped it down. And so my microscope actually looks quite a bit like that, where it's just kind of two lenses. And then I do somewhat, I mean, it's not even fancy. It's just like somewhat more complex than nothing work to make the illumination better, to basically shine light in a specific way, to make it really uniform on the surface. But besides that, it's like pretty straightforward. And I like to call it elegant, even though I feel kind of funny when I go to a conference and people have their pictures of their like super complex microscopes, and mine's just like elegant.
Hey, if it works, it works, you know?
To your point about, I guess, how I started on this project. So I did a capstone project at Temple where I built a microscope, or actually it was an interferometer, which is...
what?
Yeah, it's kind of similar to a microscope. So what I was trying to do was I was trying to watch sound waves move through a material. So if I bang on this table, you hear it because the atoms are basically shaking, and you kind of hear that shaking, but you can't actually see it. So I wanted to see that. And so the way that we were trying to do that was basically pass some light through a crystal like this and pass like an identical beam of light through basically the same crystal, and then have them come back together. And so if nothing is happening, you basically have these two light beams that are identical. They're seeing the same crystal. They come back together. Everything looks the same. Like it's basically like you just shine the light at a wall. But if you like do something to one of the beams but not the other, it changes the light in that beam. And so when they come back together, you get an interference pattern. And so that's what we were trying to measure. That's why they call it an interferometer, because you're interfering with one of the two beams of light. It was really fun. I really enjoyed making it. And I remember the professor who's teaching the course saying something during the course about, sometimes I kind of wish that I'd done more like bio applications or medical applications or something. And so that stuck with me. And when I came to Stanford, I realized pretty quickly that what had been very like deep love for physics and just like learning physics had turned into a deep desire to do something with that. And I wanted to do something more applied. And maybe being in Knight-Hennessy also influenced this, where, there's all these people running nonprofits and like, just doing all this crazy stuff. And I was like, whoa, I want to get a piece of that. And I care about medicine because I was diagnosed with cancer at the, end of my freshman year of college. And I spent a lot of time, I spent 3.5 years of chemotherapy, and I spent a lot of time in hospitals, and I've had a lot of procedures. So I think I basically walked into my advisor's office to meet with him. And I said, hey, I want to build something, and I want to use optics to solve some medical problem, basically. And I want to use optics in medicine. He basically suggested this project to try and non-invasively count white blood cells, so that people who chemotherapy patients don't have to get as many blood draws. Because one of the things, oftentimes people going through chemotherapy will die not actually from the cancer itself, but because they're immunosuppressed and they get sick from some random disease. You can also imagine that going to a hospital is somewhat dangerous for someone who's immunosuppressed, because there are all these sick people going to the hospital. And so they would always have me basically get a blood test, make sure I was like safe enough basically to go to the hospital to get chemotherapy, or healthy enough. And I was really inspired by this project to try and basically make it so people didn't have to do that. Now, of course, I pivoted off of that and didn't succeed, but someone else probably will, and it'll be better down the road. But yeah, that's how I started.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a very inspiring story, and I love and appreciate how you're trying to make that really challenging experience, of navigating cancer better for other people. My mom, has stage 4, and so I know it's not an easy journey. Not personally, so I can't really, and I think you both are.
Kind of understand, yeah.
From an outside perspective, I don't know from the actual, and I admire her a lot, and I admire you a lot for your strength and adversity. And it makes me happy to see both of you, not trying, but actually doing, and paving the way to make that less painful for other people in the future.
Follow up on Sydney's point there. I think so much of your life changes when you're going through chemo and recovering. How did you cope? And then what do you feel like your experience with cancer gave you perspective on?
I guess I was really focused on surviving. I think the actual cancer itself and the chemotherapy, for the most part, I think I didn't have too much of a problem with. There was one specific month, I think it was September of 2015, that was really bad. I just it was just a horrible month. That was really bad. It was also the first time I was diagnosed in April. It was the first time that I ever felt sorry for myself. I was why? Why is this happening to me? I think the harder part was feeling lonely, which actually it's interesting. People nowadays can understand it a lot better with COVID. Yeah. It was very fascinating for me all of a sudden when everyone started socially isolating and wearing masks and all that stuff. And I was like, whoa, this is very similar to what I had to do. And just it's very jarring to just be pulled out of your life. That was just by far the hardest part. Not actually the cancer stuff itself. There are procedures that aren't super fun. You just kind of keep breathing. But having all your friends go back to school and you're not there, and then I couldn't have roommates until I finished, just for immunosuppression reasons. So that's just pretty lonely, honestly. And it's something I don't think I even fully appreciated. Well, until I lived my senior year, I lived with my brother and 3 other people. It was super, super fun. But then coming to Stanford, it wasn't even a question. It was I want to live with roommates, I know a lot of people, they get to grad school and they're like, all right, enough of this. But I was so alone and so lonely, at Temple. And so, that was really nice to be back. I think that was the hardest part. That and just the duration, just because, I had 7 months of intense chemotherapy followed by roughly 3 years of maintenance chemotherapy, where I would have chemo once every 4 weeks. And yeah, it's just kind of, I guess, exhausting. Like I just had to really narrow what I spent time on. And I was always really curious. I was like, what am I going to do when I get, 25% of my time back? What's going to happen? Am I going to be like an amazing scientist, or am I going to like learn Spanish, or I don't know, to bake
gluten-free croissants?
Yeah,
gluten-free croissants. Yeah.
I didn't do that. I'm bad at baking. And what ended up happening is I ended up just using that 25% of time to just hang out with people. And it's so funny. I think I do the exact same amount of like science as I did when I was basically working 3 weeks and then taking a week off. But yeah, my life's certainly like richer, and yeah, it's just much better. So yeah, I think that narrowing down on that helped. And then I guess in terms of the loneliness, being a little more proactive about trying to stay connected with people was really helpful. I think this is the whole like Imagine a World thing.
Yeah, you literally were teeing up that, and I'm pretty sure Sydney has a question on this. And I will say it's interesting because what I heard you talk about is basically this idea that it's not like a past tense thing. It's like a thing that always, like, you're always coping in a way. Like, we're not always coping, but like to the point that you brought up, like you came to Stanford like, I want roommates. Like that was like a way you sort of like were dealing with some of the ramifications of your experience, which I hadn't thought of that as like an experience you have.
Yeah, I think, in some ways there are good things that I've brought from it, and then there are some things I've had to unlearn. Specifically, I had a amazing therapist at Stanford, shout out Stanford Caps, and Dr. Dakwar, shout out. And she used to be like, that's great, Marcus, but you're not sick anymore. He's like, you need to like rewire your brain, because I had this like
truly said like a therapist.
It was honestly great advice, because I narrowed the way that I viewed life to be very short. Just like for these 4-week periods was just like my whole world, because it just literally just didn't feel like it made any sense to think beyond this 4 weeks. Even when, I guess, rationally, I was probably going to be fine since, November 2015. But I've had to unlearn that. And, it's like, it's okay to plan far in advance. And it's also okay not to maximize for like daily dopamine. So it's like, you'll actually be more happy if you don't just like hit the dopamine button on your phone. And, if you go work out or go to lab or whatever. And so I think there are some good things. I, remember how it felt to want people to basically like ask how I was doing. And I remember how it felt to be sick. And I remember how it felt to be poked by needles. And these are things that I try really hard to, make better for the people around me. But yeah, there are also probably bad things that I've had to unlearn. And I think I'm getting there. So, yeah.
It's a work in progress. Yeah. Baby steps. You're doing great.
Yeah. I think one of the things about cancer that I guess struggled with was this idea that people kind of didn't know what to say. And when I'm talking to you guys about like coping or how it affected my life, I think the ways that it affected me actually just like very normal. You don't have to have cancer to feel lonely, or I guess rewire your brain a little bit. I don't think it's as ununderstandable, I guess, as I think sometimes people think. And really, like, the way that you're feeling is I think, just very human. Mm-hmm. The advice that I'll give people if they, like, if they have a family member who has cancer or something, or gets diagnosed and then talks to me is like, hey, like, what should I say? Is just to ask people, hey, how are you feeling today? Mm-hmm. And it's a very specifically worded question, because oftentimes people would be like, oh, I'm thinking about you, or like, I'm praying for you. And that's just the end of a sentence, or not the end of a sentence, it's the end of a conversation. And that's great as an end of a conversation, but it's not it's not like a beginning. And it also doesn't make any kind of judgment as to like how you're feeling, because probably you're not feeling great, like realistically, it's like, oh, I hope you're doing well today. It's like, well, I'm not, Yeah, it's just something I think I wish, I guess, people had asked me, because like I said, it's not like, okay, I had to have chemotherapy. It stinks. I have a headache and I'm tired. But it's actually, I guess that feeling of human connection that I found the most hard.
I feel like there's a big theme in your episode of like simplicity, from your statement to like the microscope to how easy it is to check in on people, and the simplicity of your imagine a world statement. I really feel like we need to follow that theme more, because I feel like, myself included, I'm sometimes an overthinker and a lot of things, and it's like, Sydney, it's not that deep. Like, just ask, just say things. And yeah.
And people will guide you too. If you ask how you're feeling, they'll talk as much or as little as they want. They can talk about like, oh, I'm so mad that Lewis Hamilton lost his race or something, or
Did he lose a race recently?
I actually, embarrassingly, have not watched the most recent Formula One race, so I don't know.
I don't even follow Formula One. I just know who he is because of the Met stuff, like the Met Gala and whatnot.
Yeah.
But anyway.
No, I don't know either.
Yeah, okay. Exposing ourselves.
I'm actually flattered by this. I love, I don't know. Yeah, simplicity.
Flattered by what? Expand on.
I don't know. You saying that there's a theme of simplicity in my talk.
I'm glad. Good. Yeah.
Cool. So maybe we'll go into improbable stuff, and then we can probably wrap, I think. Well, maybe I have one follow-up question. So yeah, to this point of simplicity, it's one of these things where it reminds me of a class I'm taking right now at the GSB called Winning Writing. Shout out Rachel Conrad, who's the lecturer for that. And she has all these rules for writing, and it's all about, very simple rules. She always says the rules are very simple, but they're very hard to follow. I wonder for you, what are your reflections on why something that's so simple, like checking in on friends or spending time with them, what about that, even though it's so simple, is so hard?
I think it's just hard. I don't think things being simple makes them easy, I guess.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be happy during the day, I should probably wake up, eat breakfast, work out, shower, go to work, have my hair not look horrible.
It looks great, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. But I don't always pull that off. Look, it's tiring for me too to try and check in on people, and I also forget it. So I think it's just hard, but I think it's worth trying.
And what about it do you think is
What about it is hard?
Yeah.
I think the thing that's hard about trying to actually check in on somebody is that you have to become okay with them responding. If you're going to say how are you feeling today? And then they respond and they start talking, you now have to give attention to that. And attention takes energy and time, and you almost have to be careful with how much you use. It's one of the things I think that's changed about me since I came to Stanford is when I first came here, I literally had coffee with every single Knight-Hennessy scholar of the first cohort, except for one, Zoe. I had all of the scholars in my cohort. I tried to know, and then the new cohort came, the 2020ers, and I wanted to meet all of them. And then my brain, somewhere in that year, just exploded. I really had to just shrink down because I want to actually be able to know what's going on with people and support them and feel close with them, and physically can't do it with an infinite number of people. And so I think I respect how difficult it is, but I think it's really worth doing, and I think it's really meaningful, and we all can understand it from the pandemic. It's really jarring when suddenly you don't have it. And yeah, that just has really stayed with me. So
yeah, beautiful statements. I feel like all your words are poetry. I love it. I guess to transition into some of our closing questions, as people may or may not know, when you apply to Knight-Hennessy, you have to answer and list 8 improbable facts about yourself as part of the application. And these are things that are true about you, but people may not necessarily know. And so, Marcus, I was wondering if you would want to share a few. I'm looking at your Scholar Portal now. There's some really cool ones on here. And yeah, if you have, after that, also advice for scholars who are, or people who are interested in applying to Knight-Hennessy.
Sure. Yeah. I'm curious which ones you find cool.
We'll do the post review after you.
That's so funny. I think, we've talked about Avondale actually quite a bit. So I'll talk a little bit about one of them, which is that I kind of helped teach the physics courses in my high school, my senior year, because my high school teacher slipped. They hadn't salted the parking lot, and he slipped on ice and got just a horrendous concussion. He was out for like months.
Whoa.
And
Dang.
they couldn't find a sub in our area who could could teach physics. And so they had our math sub who's amazing. But then I happened to have study hall during at least 2, if not 3 of the extra classes. And so I just went, and I didn't really like lecture, but I was kind of like the TA. Like I would just sit there, and then if they needed help, I would help them.
Wow.
And
That's so kind.
it was pretty cool. Also good because I feel like the previous year when I took physics, I wasn't that good.
Yeah, it's different when you got to teach it.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it just kind of made me better.
For sure. Any other improbable effects you find cool, Sydney?
Yeah, well, that one I really liked. I thought it was really cool because it's very impressive when you're like a teenager teaching people.
Well, I think, honestly, like the perfect time to teach is right after you learned it.
That's
right?
true.
Because they'd be like,
that's right.
Why is the force going to the center when you're going in a circle? And I like took this, I was like, how do I explain this? I was like, and I found this roll of tape and I put a marble on the inside and I like went like this. And I was like, see, like it can only go in a circle because it's being pushed towards the center, right? Because it's being pushed by the tape.
Wow.
And so I was like,
yo, that's crazy.
Right?
Yo.
And so anyway, it was because when I was like 1 year prior, I was like, why is it going towards the center? This doesn't make any sense, you know? And so anyway, I think it's actually the perfect time to have people teach.
Might need you to teach me physics. That was
Honestly,
No, I'd be happy
honestly,
to.
teach some of my courses.
So
I feel
you
like
want to build a
we,
microscope.
yeah. I feel like we need a 9th fact that you have an incredible memory. Like these attention to detail of like all these show and tells of first this like, tape marble thing to like your mom's presentation to like all these other things. I'm very impressed.
Memory calls is really good.
Yeah, really good. One thing I really liked is, I went to Duke, so I'm a huge basketball fan, and one of your fun facts says, as manager for the Temple men's basketball team, I have rebounded, which means you catch the ball and you pass it back, for NBA players during their workouts. And your favorite is Wayne Ellington. So.
Yeah, Wayne Ellington is super nice. Like, just a great guy.
So this gets at a question I have actually about NBA players, because like, love Wayne Ellington. And then is there anyone else that you were like, oh wow, it was really cool, like being this person's rebounder?
I think Wayne Ellington is the one.
Okay, the one, okay.
Yeah.
So I've heard that like sometimes NBA players have like a persona, like they present themselves as like affable, like very nice, like publicly, but they're kind of like jerks. Did you experience any of that? I'm not gonna ask you to name names, you know what I'm saying? But I'm just curious about that as an experience.
I didn't. I think I was pretty lucky. I don't want to say anything bad about anybody.
I was just curious. I wasn't asking for an actual, name. I was just saying, like, how you seen it happen. I just feel like, anyway, not my business.
I will say, I think most people acted as I expected them to act.
Okay, so now we want our final question. Clean, simple advice for anyone who is interested in applying to Knight-Hennessy. Or it could be something that you wish you would have known that you did not know when you were applying / once you got into the program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my advice is basically that you want to be as yourself as possible in this application. So Knight-Hennessy does a very good job of asking for exactly what they want. So they ask very specific questions because they want to hear the answers to those questions. And so you don't have to think a lot about what do they actually mean by this question. You want to really answer the question, and then you want to answer it as you. So you don't want, it doesn't have to be super crazy fancy or anything. And so the way I did this was I'm not a very good writer, but I basically just walked around the streets of Philly with a phone and just like talked into the phone, just like talking stories into the phone. And I come home and I transcribe them and try and figure out which stories just felt like basically the best. Yeah, it's something where you want to have your family and friends, I guess, read it and be like, oh yeah, that's Marcus. And then I guess the other piece of advice is that there's not really one like Knight-Hennessy scholar template. Some people are, really like focused on one thing. Some people are really good at a bunch of different things. You can really afford to, I guess, take risks and, try and go for home runs instead of trying to avoid strikeouts and just go for it. Just like be yourself. Just, write something that, feels like you and makes you happy. Back in the day when I applied all those years ago, the application deadline was super early. First of all, I didn't think there was a chance I would get into Knight-Hennessy because I looked at the resumes of all the people who got in the first year. I was just like, no. But I was like, why not? It'll be fun. And I thought it could be like an early draft for all the other essays I would have to write for like fellowships and stuff. and grad school. And so my Knight-Hennessy application, which, by the way, was like, the only one I won was my draft for all the other ones. And so I actually think I kind of
Yeah. Maybe that speaks to the authenticity you're talking about.
Exactly. So I think try and be as much you as possible and figure out, I guess, which stories best show that.
Well, Marcus, it's been a pleasure to have had the nexus person of Knight-Hennessy on the pod. No, but seriously, really appreciate you sharing so openly, so simply and elegantly, as Sydney mentioned, and so candidly, just like about your life experiences and just how you see the world. So we are extremely fortunate to have you as part of this community, and we can't wait to see what you do with your life.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me.
Of course.
Awesome.
Our pleasure.
Right. Till next time.
Bye. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Imagine the World, where we hear from inspiring members of the KHS community who are making significant contributions in their respective fields, challenging the status quo, and pushing the boundaries of what is possible as they imagine the world they want to see.
This podcast is sponsored by Knight-Hennessy Scholars at Stanford University, a multidisciplinary, multicultural graduate fellowship program providing scholars with financial support to pursue graduate studies at Stanford while helping equip them to be visionary, courageous, and collaborative leaders who address complex challenges facing the world. Follow us on social media at Knight-Hennessy and visit our website at kh.stanford.edu to learn more about the program and our community.